So good morning, one and all, and welcome to Magic is Threes, a panel where I talk about just the recurring number of three, especially in this show, but also in popular culture and in our own history. I mean, within this show, we've got, 1, 2, 3 big princesses, the 3 Cutie Mark Crusaders, the main 6, which is a multiple of 3. Have you noticed the cutie marks? Applejack has 3 apples, Pinkie Pie 3 balloons, Fluttershy 3 butterflies, and Rarity 3 diamonds. Twilight goes for the gusto with lots of stars. And Rainbow Dash refuses to conform to your stereotypes. How dare you?
But the stars are all 6-pointed, which again, multiple of 3.
Well done.
And technically there are 6 of them.
Yes. So what's so big about 3? Why does it keep coming up? Because this is something that I wrestled with actually relatively recently. Because for a long time there was a question haunting me. As you pointed out, I have sun, friendship, and moon. But what about Cadence?
She's better than them to begin with, so...
Well, what is it with Cadence? For the longest time, I've often felt like she's sort of that odd puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. She was suddenly there, that everybody loved her right away. And I was like, but who are you? What are you doing? Why are you a princess now when Twilight's on her way? Or at least she's a big part of this.
When did Twilight get a brother?
When did Twilight get a brother? Well, okay, you see, when a mom and a dad love each other...
then first they make one, then there's another one.
There's another one, and then she takes all your stuff.
You make the younger one, and then you make the older one. Makes sense.
Actually, it's funny, we're going to get into a similar paradox.
Oh boy.
But, okay, so for a long time, Cadence really, it was hard to reconcile her within the large world of Equestria. And got to a frustration because we never got to spend enough time with her that I really got to say, yes, this is where she shines. It's been sort of a rough road. I don't hate Cadence as a character, but I do feel like she got a bad representation or not enough opportunities to show her best. But then I went to a presentation on the idea of goddesses, and the speaker did not use My Little Pony, but of course, in all fandoms, there's always 5 degrees of separation from Star Trek.
Yes! Yep.
Always the Star Trek. It always comes down to the Star Trekin'. And, okay, let us count. Here we have Tasha Yar. Short-lived within the series, I'm afraid, but she was a very important warrior figure. On the other side, we had Deanna Troi, who was much more emotional. Heck, her role was counselor, and sitting there, and wearing slightly revealing clothing. Baby steps. But in the middle, Dr. Beverly Crusher, who's sort of a median point. She could be emotional, empathic, but she could also be very stern and even harsh when needed. So basically, you had 2 extremes balanced by a middle point. Fast forward DS9. You have Kira, she has been a rebel fighter. She is a liaison, but she's first and foremost a very hardened fighter and can be a bit abrasive. You have Jadzia Dax, who, thanks to, this gets a little far into Star Trek lore, but basically she has a symbiote that gives her memories of past hosts. So she has a wealth of lifetime experience that makes her very empathetic, very jovial, very, in fact, energetic, which is something to behold. Now, not pictured here is Cassidy Yates, who would eventually become Benjamin Sisko's wife, and a pretty key player in the latter parts of the series. She was, again, a median point, because without giving too much away in case you haven't seen the DS9, please do, she was a mixture of both. Both empathy and warrior type. And it's not exclusive. I mean, Jadzia could startle Klingons. She was just this fun, but also a fighter as well. So it's not all or nothing. But when you think about it, when I think Jadzia, I usually think of a fun, jovial spirit. Kira's a more fighter. And it keeps going. I really appreciate that they clustered all 3. Lana Torres, part Klingon, loves to fight, very abrasive. Her first day on the job, she punched someone. Kes was much more emotional and empathic. She was almost childlike, because her species really got the short end of evolution. Like, what, 8 years?
9, I believe.
9. Yep, right, because I have 1 more year. Well, what am I saying? If I had that lifespan, yes, 1 more year is important.
Yeah.
And Janeway, El Capitan, and she would balance these two out.
In theory.
In theory, I understand.
Yeah, she's more Mary Sue than most.
Well, that's a topic for SF Debris to cover.
But the question is, like, if the Pestis only have 9 years, is their 9 years the same thing as per days like a normal human year, or is it a different year timeline?
I think you're going to make everyone's heads explode if you try to process that. It's a very good question, but I don't know how Star Trek ever addressed a universal timeline.
They didn't.
They didn't, so,
And
you know,
her 9 years could be 90 years in our year.
well, I promise that that's not the case, that we did see her age quite rapidly.
Oh yeah.
So, I wish that were true. That would be a fantastic... Okay, I can only live 9 years. Aw, your 9 years are worth 900 of ours. Yay. So here was this returning theme of a warrior, an emotional support, and in between a balancing focus. 1, 2, 3. And I thought about that for a minute. I thought, oh my gosh, wait a minute. For a time, we had 3 princesses. One that was all about love, very emotional. One that had a very dark history and was really probably the most combative of the princesses in Equestria. She was the fighter. And in between them, being this harmonious center point, the balance. I will always feel bad that Celestia seemed to lose every fight she got in, but she could step up and fight. Right? She was never afraid or hiding in the corner. But she was also, and perhaps most especially, a very emotional pillar for both the ponies and especially Twilight. So I thought, okay, now I'm getting a little context. Maybe this is how Cadence ties into this larger world. Maybe it's in the presentation they called it the 3 goddesses. I always hesitate to call alicorns gods because that sets a really high expectation, which is a good way to disappoint fans. But they are yet very high-placed figures that mean a lot. They represent pretty strong ideas. But this is not unique to our modern generation. There was a time before Star Trek.
What?
I know, right? There was a time where Star Trek is in the list. It was called... Oh, well, I should also mention, again, we got the 3 Cutie Mark Crusaders. We got Scootaloo, kind of a warrior. She's very athletic, very boisterous. Sweetie Belle, very emotional. I mean, when she gets mad, you know it. And in between is Apple Blue. We will return to them. Also, we have Aurora Borealis. Past, future, present. One knows everything that's come before. One knows what's to come. This one keeps them centered so they can actually talk to people. It'd be really nice if you... Imagine if you said, I knew you'd say that. I haven't said anything yet. I knew you'd say that, see? Good luck having a conversation. I would get such a headache.
That strikes me as the maiden, the mother, and the crone to a point. Or is that another example of the Trinity?
It is, in a very real sense. It's 3 stages of life. Again, 3 just keeps coming up in our history.
Power, wisdom, courage, everyone?
Oh, the Triforce.
Yes.
Which was created by 3 goddesses. See? This is what we talk about when we say the collective unconscious. It's not anything that we set out to do, and yet it's this message in the depths of our mind, shared by almost every human being. It's like there from the start. A message from our unconscious collective to ourselves. We're trying to give ourselves a message through storytelling.
Is that the same concept as folk memory? Just
I'm not as familiar with folk memory, so I'm unsure.
I apologize. I hope I don't start talking out of my butt. But folk memory are stories that are passed down through generations. Like we've all heard, or I hope we've all heard, of the tales of the Brothers Grimm, Mother Goose. Most of us have never seen the book or never read the stories ourselves, but those are tales that we just may inherently know in one form or another, just passing through the generations. Like something I'm sure we've all heard without ever realizing it. Starlight, star bright, first star I see in the night. I wish I may, I wish I might, have the wish I wish tonight. That's just something we all know.
because we hear it everywhere. It permeates. That's
Without realizing it.
there's a term called mother culture. It whispers in your ear every day. You're never truly aware of it, but it's imprinting ideas. But it's kind of funny. Folk memory arises from the collective unconsciousness, because here's this message. It found expression in those folk stories, and those folk stories get passed down. They take different forms, they take different shapes, but the ideas are omnipresent, and ideas are one of the hardest things to wipe out. I'd say almost impossible. But the idea of threes in our culture continues.
Prime numbers can only be divided by 1 or itself. 3 is a prime number, the Holy Trinity. The thesis and antithesis come together and form the synthesis,
Look,
which is
this
like
is
spiritual.
not a seminar on metaphysics, son.
It kind of is. By the way, if you've never seen Stealth, you now don't have to. This is the only relevant scene in that entire awful movie.
Thank you, Electro.
It's true. I mean, he was a great actor, but that was not a great movie for him. He died. I don't care if I'm spoiling it. You don't need to see it. But again, the idea of threes also appears in better media.
First shalt thou take out the holy pin. Then shalt thou count to 3. No more, no less. 3 shall be the number thou shalt count, and the number of the counting shall be 3. 5 is right out.
Right out. I do love it. 5 is right out. But and again, 3 continues on. I've talked about Star Trek. I'm going to talk about stuff before Star Trek. But there's also a show I dearly loved that covered the idea of threes, and it was very pivotal to the structure of their universe. But first, I did promise before Star Trek. Well, let's go to ancient Babylon.
Oh, I'm not talking about 1-5.
Or are you?
Well, okay, in ancient Babylon, we had Anu, Lord of Heaven and Father Deity. We had Marduk, the Lord of the Lower Realm. That's us. And then Ea, Lord of the Deep Sea. And in this case, Deep Sea is very much similar to the underworld. So basically, and then, fast forward to, say, Greek mythology, you have Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Heaven, ocean, but that tends to encompass a lot of the land as well, and the underworld. It's this idea of 3 parts. Everything is built around 3s. In Egypt, they had a concept of 3s as well. We had the Father, the Son, and the Ka. And no, it was not a big snake singing, "Trust in me, trust in me." No, the Ka instead was a sort of spirit or energy, protective and creative power. It created the link between the Father and the Son. It helped prepare things. And if you see a connection to that in Christianity, hey, there we go. See, we're getting on the same wavelength. Exactly. May not be a one-to-one comparison, but there's a similar idea running through. Now, if I remember my clips right, I talked about ancient Babylon. Now,
You are the beginning of the story, and the middle of the story, and the end of the story that creates the next great story.
so if I've hammered in the point enough, it's that 3s are pretty common in our history, in our beliefs, in how we represent things. Why, though? What's so special about 3 other than the whole prime number thing? I'm not going to play Stealth again. No, you saw the clip once. That's all you need. I promise. Well, let's bring it back to ponies, because, hey, people often say, oh, why do you overthink a kid's show? Nuts to you. I'm thinking about these really grand concepts that have gone throughout our time. And there's this really good show about ponies that's great as an example. Thank you. And then they hit the block button, or I delete their comment. It's the internet. It's fun. So, number symbolism. Let's start with the 1. But to talk about, before we get into the 1, we've got Carl Jung, who is the one who talked about the collective unconsciousness. He's the one who basically coined a lot of these terms. I'm not sure if he talked about folk memory, but he coined these phrases and got people thinking. But before he showed up, you had Pythagoras, which, in case you haven't noticed, I believe it's a Greek philosopher. I sometimes get Greek and Roman.
He's Greek.
Okay, I'm bad at that.
They're so close to each other.
It's all Greek to me. But he put a lot of thought into the numerical value of the universe. and a lot of ideas. And
Triangles.
And circles. Well, oh yeah, he loved triangles. In fact,
I still feel there's a solution probably involving triangles.
Pythagoras, what is it with you always with the triangles? Your solution to everything is triangles. There are problems in life that can't be solved with triangles.
I do love the way he pronounces triangles.
Question, what was that from?
That was from Red Dwarf and an episode called Wax World, where wax droids, they've been programmed to act like historical figures, but they broke their programming and became sentient. But they still acted out their roles. So basically you have all these historical figures, good and regarded as evil, all in the same area. It was chaos. It was wonderful. So Pythagoras, we're talking about the one, he pointed out an idea. One on its own, is it a real number? I know the song goes, one is the loneliest number, but that implies you're counting. Assume for a minute you were the only human ever. It's not all the other humans are gone. It's just you, Adam in the garden. What's the point of counting when there's nothing more to count? I mean, you are basically the sum total of humanity. What do I feel like having today? I feel like a steak. All of humanity wants a steak. Time for the group census. 1. Okay. Kind of pointless. Big waste of time. So if you only had the one alicorn, would there be much point in talking about alicorns as a group when there's only the one? Oneness, it is the simplest state. It's very basic, but it's also really hard to understand. It's unknowable and indefinable because you have nothing to compare it to. It just is. It's there, sitting in almost like a lump. I mean, when Celestia first hit the scene, we really didn't know a lot about it. We didn't understand. And even now, it's really hard to know what's going through her head at times. Is she a chess master maneuvering everything? Or is this really just her keeping up with scenes and sometimes tripping over her own errors? Fans still debate about this. And it's hard to know. Because really, the one can't have an identity unless there's the other. Number 2, a second, dare I say, a younger sibling. The one's opposite, sun, moon. Light, dark, yin, yang. We continue that theme. One's opposite the other, and in some cultures, the second are the same word. It's like they're meant to go together, and yet they're also meant to be very different. Exceptionally so. It represents the opposite. Okay, Luna is Celestia's opposite in so many ways. I love Between Darkness and Dawn. Even when they want to just have fun, they go polar opposite routes. Celestia's all about getting out and being wild, having a physical adventure. Luna wants to take it easy and be in the company of other ponies to take in culture. And they clash. They clash so much. I've seen complaints that when it's a Celestia and Luna episode, all they're going to do is fight. Which seems a little weird because that happens a lot with the other characters as well. Why expect something different? But the truth is, this relationship between them is based on conflict. It's polarizing and often lacking in unity. It's called a dyad. Not because they're going to die, but there is that risk, isn't there? 2 figures. It's 2-dimensional. It's an idea, but it's not yet a reality. You have these two, you lump them together and they're supposed to get along. Great idea, not so easy in reality. I mean, like I say, I do appreciate that at the start of the series we had a representation of the Tao, which is supposed to be the harmonious balance between polar opposites. What is it? Light, masculinity, fire, you name it, dark, femininity, water, these ideas.
Oh, the yin and yang.
That's all what the yin and yang represents.
Oh.
All together.
Softness, hardness, all that.
Exactly. Think of 2 opposites, and the yin and the yang represent them. So that's it. That's what that symbol is meant to represent. But there's also a challenge with this. There's a tension. See, the one remembers what it was like to be just them, and how hard it was to really have a sense of self. They're saying, here before me is an other. I suddenly know who I am better because I've met this other. I want to be around this other so I can understand myself better and get to know them, because now I'm discovering things I never knew, things that are foreign to me. But the other, in this case the younger sibling, has never known a life without the one. Never had a chance to be on their own. So they're pushing for identity, for individuality, to feel like they can stand independent when they have to. And poor Luna, who became Nightmare Moon, never felt like she was getting recognition as an individual. She was always Celestia's younger sister. She was always the princess of the less popular knight, the one that was ignored while they celebrated the one. And she hated it. And it led to some familiar conflict.
Luna, I will not fight you. You must lower the moon. It is your duty. Luna, I am Nightmare Moon. I have but one royal duty now: to destroy you!
And yeah, it leads to a lot of conflicts, and for a while, a couple thousand moons, they say now, banishment. Although I've always wondered about moons. Never really locked down how long a moon is. I know we have a term for that here in the world, our world, but it might not be a one-to-one. It could very well be that if you did the calculations and worked through it all, 1,000 moons ago was a week ago last Tuesday. It wasn't that long a cooling off period. Ponies just have really bad memories.
Yes, but...
So, but here's the thing. Even then, even after a betrayal and assault by her younger sibling, Celestia recognized the fact that she couldn't be complete without the other.
Deep inside, you know how powerful you are. You don't need Luna. That's not true. Even when we were apart, I knew I needed her.
There it is. Even when we were apart, I knew I needed her. She knew she couldn't do this completely. We were meant to rule Equestria together. And though Celestia often looks like she's calling the shots, she can do so more and with perhaps greater confidence and maybe a little feedback because of Luna. And, hey, sometimes when Celestia is making a big mistake, like putting too much faith in Shining Armor's defenses, overlooking certain elements, there's the other to have the most awesome scene in Season 9, in my opinion. Grrr, grrr, grrr. And poke a hole in her theory, which she needed, despite the very awkward smiles at the end. But here's where the third comes into play. And at first I thought it was going to be Cadence, but then I looked at the terms. Arising from the conflict. Who was the one who stepped up? Or rather, I guess I should say, who was the third that stepped up? Basically, the third in a relationship of a trinity is the one who brings unity and harmony. The one who takes these polar opposites and finds a way to balance them out, give a middle ground. And it develops over time. Like sprouting wings. Thanks, Emma Larson. She basically ascended to take her place amongst their peers, and in time became the new ruler that they chose, not Cadence. That really that was part of why I was sort of awkward about Cadence. Like, okay, now Twilight's an alicorn. That makes Cadence even further off to the side. And I will cover that as well. But in time, Twilight really became part of it. In other words, now the idea has become a reality. It's three-dimensional. That's width. Don't ask which pony represents width. They get very self-conscious about that.
Oh yeah.
I would love to be Celestia fan.
With her love of cakes, maybe?
Whichever one you answer determines which celestial body you get stuck on.
Or perhaps they just slam it into the planet. No one must know my dark secret.
Or it's going to a different reality.
Okay. But this is what happens. The conflict of the sisters created a need for a third. And Twilight stepped up to fill that. It wasn't an immediate thing. Celestia had to groom her, perhaps knowing this is the third. This is the balance point we need. I can't save Luna on my own, but I can help prepare the one, or the third, who will. And she kept overseeing Twilight's development and pushing her in the right directions even after. This wasn't just a one-and-done victory. It's like, you're the future. The three of us together are going to transition into a new era. And the Crusaders represent this as well. We have the Trinity. Athletic, emotional, a bit balancing point of both. And because here's the funny thing. When we first met them, we actually went the opposite route. Actually, but that's not entirely true. Twilight we met first as well, right? In this show, we often meet the third before we meet the two. The dyad is Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle, who made their appearance together.
Because... You don't have any cutie marks either? I thought I was the only one. We thought we were the only two.
The only two. Also, is it weird to hear their voices from back then, given how they've matured?
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if Claire Corlett were here, was like, oh, did I sound like that? Actually, Sweetie Belle didn't talk in my clip, what am I saying? But Squeaky Belle, that was my nickname for her at the time. But here's the thing, Apple Bloom is the third power. She's the group connector. She's the one who, heck, the Cutie Mark Crusaders were her idea. After she met these two, they instantly synced, they instantly wanted to work together. And even later, much later, season 8, when these two are at each other's throats, and just, I guess if this were Facebook, this would be called blocking.
Yes.
She's the one who's actually keeping them together.
Sweetie Belle said to tell you it's your fault that Terramar ran off. Well, you tell Sweetie Belle that if it weren't for her, our mission would have been over by now. And a success. Scootaloo says this whole thing is your fault. Well, tell her that I'm not the one who dashed all of Terramar's hopes and made him give up on the world. Both worlds. Sweetie Belle says it's your fault that Terramar ran... Oh, wait. I already told you that, didn't I?
I know what you might be thinking, that doesn't look anything like unity or harmony. In fact, that looks like the exact opposite.
Is this the group that released Discord the first time?
It is, and they're little cast bringers themselves. I'm sure he was very proud of them.
Remember that clip in that one episode of SpongeBob where Squidward gets Patrick and SpongeBob to fight over Bob? And like they both want to be his best friend instead.
And he had it, I haven't seen that episode, so it's hard to...
From season 1. So.
Did he help them reconcile eventually?
Intentionally.
Yes.
Oh, but he was still a connective power between them.
The connective power that's trying to launch them away.
Well, sometimes it doesn't work the way you planned, but you fill the role of the third whether you like it or not, in some cases. Or on that. But here's the thing. If it had just been those two on that mission, do you think they'd still be sitting on the same beach together?
No.
They're trying to give each other a cold shoulder, but they don't want to leave Apple Bloom. See, my friend. Not your friend, my friend. So they're both holding on to her. She's keeping them in proximity so they can reconcile, and eventually they do. She holds the group together. So there's that connective third. We are introduced to groups in this show through the third, but often they're stepping into a pre-established relationship, one that can be conflict-based. But here's the thing, when you're part of a trinity, you can have a group dynamic without losing your sense of self. Each of them is part of a whole, but each of them is also distinct. So is Babs until she got her cutie mark. No cuties allowed. So, basically, there's no fear in this group that you're going to lose who you are. That's not always the case, though. Because there are trinities and there are triads. And I wasn't sure what the difference was because, tri is in there. It's very hard to understand the concept of a try hard, if you will. So I looked up Merriam-Webster, and it defined triad, a union or group of three. Trinity, a group of three closely related persons or things. Thanks, Merriam-Webster. You've been a big help.
Actually,
there's a difference, right?
I was going to say, if that's the meaning of triad, then why the heck is the Chinese mob called that?
I'm not brave enough to go ask them. But actually, there may be a reason for that. Because here's the thing. Okay, these definitions, they're slightly different, especially the fact of this thing, closely related persons or things. A union or a group of three, okay, but these are closely related, not necessarily by blood. But even then, these definitions really leave a lot to be desired in terms of saying the difference. So let's talk about some triads. Not the Chinese mafia. If they see this video, I'm doomed. But a triad is conflict-based. A triad is basically three powers pushing against one another. It's a balance of power, not harmony. And the three tribes are a great example of this. Pegasi, Earth Pony, Unicorn. they all had something that gave them an edge at the table. One controlled the weather, one controlled the food supply, one controlled the day and night. None of them could make a move or dominate the other without risking the third party coming in and taking advantage of the situation. So it's almost like everyone's always braced for a fight. And they're always eyeing each other, but they can't make a move because...
A Mexican standoff.
Exactly right. Although that's highly racist and I take offense on principle.
Really?
And then lo and behold, this past season we had another triad. Don't they look happy? I had such fun watching these three in frenemies and even as they were falling apart after conquering Canterlot. But each of them they make no pretensions at being actual friends. They just want to take out the other two and be the rulers. In fact, they take that as the norm. They think that makes the most sense, classically logical. Excuse me. So we've witnessed this. You cannot approach the others without risking consumption or destruction. Either they will consume your identity and make it subservient to their own, or they'll just wipe you out. You can't form an alliance. You can't get along with them. You can only hold the line and keep things at a status quo that really may be more detrimental in the long run. They lost in no small part to the fact that they couldn't really boost each other. They won against Twilight and the others in the short term, but then they started bickering amongst themselves and couldn't follow through to get the final victory. So they undermined themselves while everyone else came back together. And that's why a triad is often stagnation bordering on larger conflicts. A mafia is often trying to hold on. They don't want to get along with other groups. They want to be the top dog. They want to find a way to circumvent or even corrupt the law to work for them, have some officials or officers on the take. So it's conflict-based. A trinity is a more harmonious relationship. It's what we see with a lot of our protagonists. Oh boy, I'm gonna botch this pronunciation, but there's a Greek term called perichoresis. It's Greek for the divine dance. So what do you do in a dance? You move with others. There's you, your partner, and the music. And you flow together if you're good. If it's me, then you might suffer some bodily harm on the feet and ankles. Sorry. But you move together, you flow. You're not afraid that this dance is going to take over your life. But right now you feel very much alive because you're with this other person sharing in this activity. Or you're stepping on each other's feet. Maybe there's some unity in that too. Interaction while still maintaining individualistic identity. You're not afraid of these other folks. You're happy to work together, to be a part of this group. And it's a good feeling. It's probably the best. Trinities, however, are not traditionally logical. We, as humans, have a pretty firm history of conflict. We're used to a fight. We expect a fight, and it's practical to anticipate a fight. And so, I think more often than not, we rely on the triad approach. We look for that status quo. The trinity is something more than human. It's more than just the basic history or a very practical anticipation of conflict. It's something greater. No wonder it factors so firmly in belief systems. It's there because it becomes greater than what we've known. And so the princesses represent this. But 1, 2, 3. What about the fourth? There's a fourth princess. She's right there. I started this wanting to understand cadence. Gosh darn it.
Technically, that was a fifth with Flurry.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh,
one Flurry. She's gonna kill us all.
Oh, they got Flurry, Princess of Explosions.
But
we already have one.
We already have one. Okay, well, but then again, Flurry is also part of a trinity. You have a guy, stallion. You have a mare. From that, there's always going to be tension between spouses. There's always going to be a relationship. But from them, there's a third power, a child, a unifying factor. She's got her mother's wings and her father's hairstyle. So, again, there's another trinity in the world. But Cadence is also a part of this because she represents the world body. And no, I'm not commenting on her figure. Why do I keep making fat jokes? The fourth, in the Crusaders' case, the fourth is Diamond Tiara. It represents ideas beyond the self. I said that a trinity, you get the three-dimensional. You've taken an idea and made it real. You've made it something that can interact with the world. Well, the world is even bigger than your idea. It's this other entity. So it's out there. And here's Diamond Tiara representing sort of a conflicting view with the Crusaders. She's pushing them a lot and giving them a great deal of grief. So she represents the world. Cadence doesn't necessarily give Twilight grief, but the fourth does create the third. Cadence was one who helped raise Twilight. Taught her, was very affectionate. When Twilight didn't believe in friendship, she still had a great deal of love and affection thanks to her brother and future sister-in-law. Diamond Tiara was part of the impetus to create the Crusaders because they all united against the bully. This idea outside of themselves that they all stood firm against. So again, the fourth creates the third. And often, that third arises because of the fourth's shadow. Basically, the fourth serves to destroy that which seems certain and requires a subjective ego response. It's our sense of self. We have to push back against it. Now, when I say shadow, well, Cadence is super nice. Does she have a shadow? Every good character has a shadow, and I'm afraid Cadence's shadow is the damsel in distress. Throughout this whole series, when going gets tough, call Twilight. Very quick. I haven't even gotten to see her put up resistance more than I think MLP the movie, where she tried to throw up that shield, block the petrification spell. More often than not, she immediately calls back on Twilight. And that's a shadow aspect because she's not really standing firm herself. But Twilight steps up for that. In fact, I wondered, where was Cadence during Nightmare Moon's return? Did Celestia not include her? Okay, the real, very meta explanation is she didn't exist yet. They hadn't introduced her in the show or even written her into a script yet. But now she's a part of that world, you have to sort of think back and try and reconcile some very disparate ideas. Cadence's passivity may mean that Celestia didn't think she could handle this project. She couldn't lead this charge to rescue Luna. So she went with a unicorn whom still had Cadence's influence, who still had learned things from Cadence from the larger world, but was a bit more assertive because she was making that ego response. And what was Twilight's ego response? I'm going to fix this problem. Celestia says, I have to stop worrying about books, but I'm not going to let this go. I'm going to keep working at it. So, and that's the same with Diamond Tiara. Here's this brat saying that I don't have value because I'm a cue mark. Well, I'll show her, me and my friends, we're not only going to get our cue marks, but we're going to do it in the most awesome way possible, and with as few casualties as possible.
Did you actually hit that one at all?
Hit one? What?
The fewest casualties, like, I'm not sure they can count those, but they did some few.
They did some damage.
Some?
Cat? I am being very generous.
Somebody call Fiora, do a death count.
Yeah, that was last night.
Oh dear. The darkness. Wait, I was part of it. I was on a headbands panel for a little while. We got some dark ideas. But that's the point. You have three characters who represent an idea, complexity, the future. I think the easiest way to sum up these three is the future. Cadence is there, the larger world. In fact, I think it's almost kind of fitting that she's in the Crystal Empire, which is both part of Equestria, but also its own independent state. Very different, it's outside, it's beyond the realm. Whatever these three decide is going to affect Cadence and later Flurryheart. And so she might have a vested interest in Flurry's future. If we could continue on, I don't know if IDW's comics that are the 10th season will do this. It'd be interesting if Twilight's own decisions conflicted with Cadence's goals. And how would they reconcile that? There, it would be another Trinity situation, except now, Cadence, Twilight, opposite ends of an argument. What's going to be the mitigating power? What's the third?
Discord.
Yes?
If you watch the third part of the finale, you see that Twilight's fixing another pupil like Cadence, like Celestia did to her. So she has her own pupil that sees grooming.
That may indeed come to the case. From the stained glasses in Twilight's new courtroom, throne room, I should say. But she may also judge there, I don't know. it looks like Flurry has ascended the throne and taken over as the Crystal Empire. So perhaps Sunny Glow, was it?
Luster Dawn.
Luster Dawn, thank you. Luster Dawn may indeed become a mitigating factor between Flurry, Twilight, and Twilight.
The emotional one. Flurry hard versus the cold logic of Twilight.
Exactly right.
Third penalty.
Yeah. I will say this, Pythagoras, who proposed all these ideas, he really struggled with the fourth, and it's probably, when trying to understand what he was saying, I had a very hard time with integrating the fourth into as an idea. Because you think about it, if you took two triangles and put them together along an angle, you'd get a rectangle, right?
A square.
Well, all squares are rectangles when all rectangles are squares? I'm trying to be obtuse about this. Thank you.
That was a cute joke, huh?
Well done. So, but basically his point is that between polar opposites you'll have a mitigating force, but that mitigating force may itself be a polar opposite or another power to another dynamic. So you had Cadence, Luna, Celestia, Luna, Twilight. You get that dynamic. And Twilight and Cadence, friendship and love. Closely related, but at the same time not the same. That's the dynamic that can form. That's where you can see trinities forming within groups. And it works. Sometimes one group is composed of like 3 critical aspects, but that group itself is part of a larger trinity of different ideologies. It can form that way. Yes?
Like the crew list of in Star Trek, you got engineering, science, and attack and security. Each is their own group within their groups, but working as a whole for the ship.
Indeed, the ship could not function without security to keep it safe. Science to figure out what's attacking us this week, and engineering to say, how do we run away? I can't do it, Captain.
Actually, speaking of Star Trek, I'm sorry for recording, but to go on with that, actually there's actually 4 different career, like main paths of Star Trek. There's command, this is captain, and then you got engineering, science, and then there's medical.
Would medical and science be considered one because...
They are, but sometimes it's considered 2 separate.
Sometimes it is that there's some give and take, but again, maybe it's different sets of 3s that form, oh wow, I'm going to sound like Mr. Popo. All these squares form a circle. Wait, oh wow. All the squares, science, security, science, engineering, command, medicine, all these squares form the circle of the Starship Enterprise. Popo was right. None shall doubt the wisdom of Popo. Yes.
This is one example for, when I think of Trinity, like, people say, when, like, there are movies people prefer, if there's like a trilogy, to wrap things up. People prefer trilogies in movies because, like, it's easy to wrap things up and, like, oh, there's a 4th one, other added ideas. But also, unlike writing, people say, if you're going to do a joke, to keep it from there's the rule of 3.
It is.
Or at least that's it's not like written down, but it's like, it's the most effective of like, if you're going to do a writing joke, do it 3 times, because if you do it too much, the audience is going to get sick of it.
And if you only do it twice, the audience is going to be just waiting for you to do it. When's the 3rd one? Make the 3rd one. And they go away frustrated.
Yes.
Now, some comedians like Andy Kaufman, they love to hold the joke and never have the payoff, because it gets an even stronger emotional response. Steve Martin loved to put a joke out there and never resolve it. But that's them playing with expectations. If you want to create a sense of completion, while they're fighting, oh wait, there's probably on one side, another side, and the crowd is the 3rd, trying to keep them engaged. See?
It all makes sense.
The group chanting, fight, fight, fight. No wonder. What more could display the dyad than sisters and needing a mitigating 3rd party that may arise from the world? Maybe the parents, it may be a bond. One example, at Winnie City we talked about this, and there was one interesting example. Appaloosa and the buffalo. Twilight and Friends, there's a reason why that's one of the worst episodes in season 1, in my opinion, because if Twilight and Friends hadn't been there, things might have actually gone smoother. And Twilight and Friends didn't even help with the resolution. The mitigating force, the unity that brought balance, was the fight. The two sides clashed. They were suddenly snapped when they realized that someone might have actually died. Whoops.
I thought it was the pie.
Well, the pie was part of the fight, and okay, they didn't really imply that he was dead because it's a pie fight, but he was down. It was symbolic of a death. That fight was the unifying force. It's counterintuitive, and that's why a trinity may not always be classically logical. But that was the force that bound them. It's like earlier with the Egyptians, Father, Son, Ka. There may be a spirit or energy that connects you. In a divine dance, there's you, your partner, and the music. Even if you're dancing without music, it's in your head. So I realized that this is covering a lot over a lot of history, and it's really a rapid-fire introduction to an idea. But you see how, when you step back and look at repeating patterns in stories, in beliefs, you start to recognize a very real dynamic. And though it's told through fiction, it strikes as a very fundamental truth, because you see it happening more and more, even when we're not conscious of it, which reinforces the belief that this is something real. And that's why stories rely on it, because stories want to at least create the illusion of reality. I'm not going to go out and look for Hogwarts, but you better believe I'm going to believe in the story. Believe that I'll believe in the me that believes in you, believe in me who believes in you. Who the hell do you think I am? So let's see here. But I must be aware, we've still got about 12 minutes, which means time for questions and answers. People getting slammed into the wall. Okay, so I'm not sure the fight in this case is the unifying force.
So long as we don't have a head go through that wall, we'll be okay.
If someone's head goes through the wall, I'm going to ask to borrow your hat. Cover it up. Yes?
So, if we're going back and Cadence not being there, then what about the dragon shy when the dragon stories would have covered Equestria? Cadence be interfering in that? Instead, let's send the Twilight of her friends in.
And again, we face that very uncomfortable meta of Cadence technically didn't exist, but now we have to go back and process it. Celestia may have realized that Twilight and friends were still better for this than Cadence might be. The dragon's not interested in a display of love, but maybe it needs a firm talking to. Now, the group of the main six, you've got the dragon, you've got Equestria. Conflict of interest, even though the dragon lives in Equestria. So you need that third power to give it a stern talking to tell it to relocate and to have it snap somewhere else. Although, if we're talking dark, doesn't that mean they just pass their problem off to another land?
The dragon territory that's already smog infested.
Oh, great! We've got the Equestrian World's version of Detroit.
Well, they didn't do that with season 1 with the Paris sprites. They just passed them on to Philadelphia, and it was only until season 7 they got rid of them.
Well, I'm gonna go all Mudbriar on you. Technically, they all went into the Everfree Forest, and there may have been another Paris sprite in Philadelphia, or Celestia might have been lying. But, by the way, I was born in LA, so I've got no right to criticize about smog.
Well, either way, it took them until season 7 to get rid of them.
It took a good long time. Wow. Maybe that's why we never got to go to Philadelphia. They had the Paris sprite plague for many moons.
See, Princess Celestia doesn't seem terribly useful if she supposedly is helping, and it takes so many years to get rid of it.
She probably got the daughter to do it.
Okay, we've got a handout.
You keep bringing Cadence up as this non-force. It just crossed my mind. Was Celestia using Cadence as the sort of fulcrum in other positions, such as you have a question on one side, a nation on the other, and Cadence being sort of the middle point as a diplomat? Because while we've never seen her fight, we have seen her be very diplomatic. And I'm wondering if that's just a different tool for a different job.
It's very possible. And that speaks to a concept I've come up with called the positivity void. Void. Basically, here's this idea. There are characters who I think we're meant to assume... Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. You bag. There are characters who I think, including Celestia, who you're meant to say, things are probably going really well because she's not on screen. And we only really get to check in when something's going wrong. So there's maybe a lot of good stuff happening off screen that we're avoiding. but then when we go to check over, Celestia and Luna are scowling at each other during a royal problem. Cadence is under attack by changelings or King Sombra. If we only get to check in with them when something's going wrong, then that's all the solid context we have. It's very easy to develop a negative opinion. In other words, highlight Cadence's passivity and calling for help all the time, even though she might be doing a lot of really good things. It's the same with the School of Friendship. Every time we checked in with that place, it seemed to be going terribly. Especially in the episode where Applejack and Rainbow Dash are competing to be the best teacher. That was an awful episode for them as teachers, as they nearly got their students killed. No pies involved. Now it's drowning. So that's what I mean by possibility. When we don't see the School of Friendship, we can assume that things are going really well. Nothing's on fire, except when Smolder and Spike hold a fire-breathing competition indoors.
Why? Or Taco Tuesday's hot sauce competition gets a little too heated.
And that's when Sanaa Dusk is like, let me in! Let me in! I love tacos! But, so you're right that Cadence could be doing a lot. She excels at seizing a moment to make a dramatic statement. When she grabs the crystal heart and flies it in with Spike's help. A little passive in receiving the heart, but getting the credit for its salvation. Although Spike did get that awesome statue. But at the same time, she knew how to sweep in and make the biggest display to snap everyone's attention and get them going again. So there is that diplomacy ability there. Unfortunately, the drive and the mission are off screen. And so it's so hard to really concretely say, this is what she's doing, even though it's a very solid assumption that she is working in that regard. But again, that's part of storytelling. What you don't show is sometimes just as important as what you do.
It's kind of like a DC9 during the Dominion where you go, why did it on the station?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Oh. It's kind of like in the Dominion where back in the Space Nine where they're still on the station and then there's a war going on.
It's supposed to be an outpost that we get a lot of word, but we don't see a lot of the fighting. Not until one season where they have to leave the station and fight to reclaim it later.
A lot of what you see and what you don't see is kind of dictated by making interesting television.
Yes.
Because it's kind of like with Jurassic Park. There's a reason why they didn't show everything going smoothly, because that's not what they were seeing.
Exactly. You might say it's boring. But I think you can also turn it on its ear. If two characters are in conflict and you bring in a mitigating force, that force is going to look pretty positive because it's affecting positive change. If the School of Friendship helped resolve some conflicts with its students, did it? On screen. On screen, I should say.
Yeah, at least in the finale resolution.
In the finale, okay, yes, there we go. See what they learned. But as teachers, did we get to see them doing a good job of teaching? I mean, physically see of the students.
No, they're not teachers.
Well, they're trying, but we only got to see them making the screw-ups. Like with Applejack and Rainbow Dash, having this conflict of egos with the students caught in the middle. And, but again, conflicting force, the students were the mitigators.
Actually, we did see them doing fairly well during the musical number, then Twilight dropped a book on them.
Ouch. We also, I do think in She's All Yak, we started to see them being better teachers, because they were each bringing their individual talents to Albiona. Rarity took a step too far, a big step too far. But
for Rarity, that's just how she is.
Right. Remember the fantasy she had of everyone's wearing at a golf course with I forget what kind of hats they were. Not quite a beret, but something similar.
Golf course hats?
Yeah, golf course hats.
She fantasizes about golf.
Maybe.
Fitting for the whitest horse on the show.
Whitest horse on the show who gets really teed off. So, this is the hard part in storytelling. What you don't see or what's summarized may have important information about a character, but we don't get to see it. It's harder when you don't have that first-hand experience. But it can still be there. I started this by talking about how I felt like Cadence never got a chance to shine on screen. That doesn't mean she wasn't shining at all. I just really wish I could have seen it. But
joke to be made there.
I'm sure. Well, she was shining with her armor. But I did get to see a young pony mend a rift between two highly prominent figures. One more myth than reality, one more idol than individual. But she not only rose to mend the rift between them, she rose to become Alicorn, and in time she rose to finish their story and begin a new one. The new era of Princess Twilight Sparkle. And that is, as Zathras said in Babylon 5, which harkens the same idea as ancient Babylon, you are the one. You are the beginning, the middle, and the end that leads to a new beginning. 3 is 1, as you are the one.
One last, I think we've all seen the finale here.
I certainly hope so, because I've spoiled so many things.
To be fair, it was streamed. We did a viewing of it here, so no one has an excuse at this point.
Okay.
Yep.
It's just the final rainbow laser, the final taste of rainbow. I can't have been the only one that noticed this. The pillars, the main 6, and the students. The past, present, future coming together within the one.
Beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
That leads to a new beginning. So there you go. I mean, even Twilight said they'll carry on our traits after we're gone. Except for me, because I'm going to be an Alicorn. I'm kidding. But yes, again, 3. It's always going to be appearing. It's going to take new forms in lots of stories. And it's always going to be an influence. And it hints at something deeper. Something that is remarkably human, but also rises above the baser humanity. And so I think that's always something to be aware of in storytelling and philosophy and in our daily lives. And I greatly appreciate that you all took the time to come here. There's me, there's the presentation, and there's you. Without you, this is completely pointless.
Unless he does it on YouTube, then it's just
Then it's just downvoted. So I thank you all for coming and for listening to me go on about 3s.